So let's get started. Now, I told you that we're going to be doing what texts? Genesis 1 through 3 is going to be the central text. And then tomorrow, if we are able to get to where I hope to today, tomorrow we will be doing how Jesus was the answer for what happened there. And I have a Sunday morning reserved in case we need that too.
I'll be here Sunday morning.
So, let's start by talking about, when you're talking about Genesis, and we're going to be doing 1 through 3 mainly. I'm going to touch on 4 and 5 into 6. And then I'll jump ahead, and when we move to Christ, we just don't have all the time in the world to do this. So, but when we're talking about Genesis 1 through 3, a lot of times I used to think of, when I read Genesis 1, I'd go, okay, that's interesting. God created stuff. That's about all I got out of it. Because I really didn't know how to listen. I didn't understand why that was even significant. Besides trying to prove that God created stuff. Well, what I want you to do is to think about this. I want you to think about actually studying the Bible in a very different way than you're used to, probably. And that is, I ask the question, how do we understand the passage of Scripture? Not what do we understand from it. How do we go about understanding Scripture? Is there a pathway to go that you can understand a verse or verses and know that you've understood them and be able to explain why they mean what they mean? It sounds like basic stuff, but we don't tend to think on that level. And I found that even common sense isn't so common. So, how do we go about it? Well, the first thing I'm going to tell you is context. I'm a context cowboy. That's what I call myself. Because I ride that horse hard. And if you're going to talk to me about verses, I want to talk to you about context. See if you know what they mean. So, I'm going to give you a tool right now. There's a few tools as we're going along. But this is a tool that I've developed. It is, to me, a valuable tool. It's priceless, and it seems very innocuous. It's called the situational triangle. And I use this, so it's inverted. And I use this to get a picture of what's going on in any book of the Bible when I'm studying it. And the principle is this. On one point of this situational triangle, we have the author. On another point, we have the audience. And on another point, we have third parties. Now let me explain the idea behind this. When you are an author or you're a writer or you're trying to get a message across, you have an intended audience, right? And so in your mind, you're thinking about this audience and their needs and the situation that they have, and you're trying to address that situation. Now there may be third parties, and those could be positive or negative to the situation. But if you are struggling with a deep depression, and I say, you know, the price of tea in China is 5 cents a cup, that makes me absolutely irrelevant to what's going on in your life and your needs. The Bible is not just some mystical book that is outside of life. It's grounded in life. And so when we talk about this situational triangle, it helps us get a picture of what's going on, the situation. And really when I'm talking about situation, I'm talking about contexts. Context. So, we're doing Genesis 1 through 3, and this goes for more than Genesis 1 through 3. But so I asked, what's the context of the writing of Genesis? And who was the author first? Moses. And always, even if you don't know who the author is, I just kind of put in parentheses, God inspired the book and the message. And so whoever wrote it with the inspiration of God. Who was the audience that he wrote to? Well, it's the reader, but who? Which ones? The children of Israel, but who? Which ones?
The Hebrews.
Post-Exodus Israelites.
Oh, okay.
That is, these Jewish people who came out of the Exodus in Egypt. And when we talk about this then, this is where he's aiming his message. And then third parties. Who are some third parties in the situation? The guy with the funny hat with the snake on it. Pharaoh. And I'm going to put other nations for now. That they met, when they came out of Egypt. Now, of course, this could be, one of the reasons I say this is Moses wrote this, I believe, after he met God, and God sent him to lead, and he was dealing with the problems and the issues of the Israelites over and over again, right? Because he was their leader. And because of that, probably this might even have been written when they're wandering around in the wilderness. And when he had to write it, he was trying to deal with stuff. He actually was an oral tradition first before it was written. In other words, he told these stories around the campfire. But he did it with a reason. And that reason was, let me ask you a quick question. What were the problems that they had? Idolatry? Well, that's true, but that's a word that I don't think we actually grasp what that means. Oh, well, they had idols. Yeah. That's superficial thinking. And that's what I want to teach you is how do you think deeper than that? So, over in Egypt, they had over 2,000 gods. This is little g gods. So this is kind of the background of them, right? They were in Egypt how long? 430 years. And how long were they slaves in Egypt? About 250 years as slaves. How many generations is that?
A whole bunch.
About 12 generations. So we got to get a little bit better reading on this. What is a slave anyway? What's a slave?
Depends on what century.
Well, generally.
Someone who has no control of their lives.
Someone who has no control of their lives. In other words, they are under the power of the master who's over them, and especially in that day, they were like beasts of burden. So a slave is someone whose life is controlled by the one who is their master. By controlled, I mean they dictate what they can and can't do, where they can and can't go, what they can and can't eat, what they can and can't wear. So basically, all areas of their life are controlled by the one who controls them. Okay, so this time, 12 generations. There's a mentality that's created as time goes on and new kids are born. And now they're not born knowing what it's like outside of captivity. All they know is captivity. And everywhere they look, what do they see? Gods in Egypt. Everywhere. 2,000. That means they had localized gods that were over different areas. In fact, another thing we need to ask, what makes something a god? What makes something a god?
Power.
Power. What do you mean by power?
Authority. Power.
Power or authority over you. That makes something a God.